Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming to this workshop on heat, which is a growing issue in Hong Kong. And I'm Christine Lowe. I'm part of the Climate Science and Climate Policy team at HKUST. This is the first time we're using this marvelous venue, so I hope we can all enjoy this very nice room. So to start, I'd like to introduce Professor Alexis Lau, who's the head of our little team and department, who will say a few words before we begin. Alexis.
Well, thanks very much for coming. This is also my first time. We heard about this place for maybe a little bit more than half a year, but first time to come here. And I hope you find this is a place that you can easily come, because we are actually planning a lot of activity down the road around here. So today we are continuing a discussion, because in May we actually have a similar workshop talking about potentially this, according to the projection, this year will be one of the hottest year on record. So we kind of make a bet to say, well, be careful or beware of that, and also we want to get people kind of alert on that, and hopefully have some experience sharing after going through a really hot summer. So today we are kind of continuing that discussion. I don't know whether it's fortunate or not, but definitely this was one of the hottest year, and CM will be really coming and talking about that. And we want to see how this impact different sector, as well as what, as a community or a platform for discussion, the university can really serve. And here, so today we get a lot of, much less university person talking, but really from the community. First, we look at the science as well as some of the surrounding parameter, and then in the second session, we will have some sharing from community group as well as how to respond. Okay, so this is our focus for this year. Next year, maybe I'll just do some advertising. We will focus in heavy rain because we want to put focus on certain topic so that we can bring a more focused discussion. So look out for those. But today, let's continue this discussion. So today we have a first panel talking about the science and the effect. And with us, the bio of all the speakers are on the website, so I don't want to spend time talking about it. But certainly I think everyone in Hong Kong knows about CM. And now we are talking about Mr. Sanjok, because he was the director of the observatory when Sanjok was hitting us. So maybe I'll get CM to start first.
Good morning, everybody. So today I'm going to give you an update about the heat, how bad it was this year. So the original plan was I would be the moderator, but because the observatory is fully occupied today, so they can't send their representatives here, so I have to present on their behalf as well. So I think you can see that we have been departing from our norm by quite a large margin in the past year, actually since June last year. Now the gap, well, actually the gap is closing between this year and last year, but not before that. So we are still having a large gap with the past, which means we are already 1.65 degrees above the industrial period. So even though we have to wait for a few more years to confirm that we will be breaching the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degree targets, but this is not a good sign. And even La Nina, the cooling effect, is gradually developing. Still, we haven't got the temperature down significantly. So you can see that all along all those years, the carbon dioxide has been increasing in the atmosphere, and now we are already seeing 420 ppm towards the top. So whether or not in the next few years we'll get it to start to decline, I don't know. This is the latest chart issued by WMO before COP29, and you can see that this year we're likely to exceed 1.5 degrees whole year. And for this region, people coming from the Southeast Asia obviously felt this heat. This April, there are huge areas with significant heat, and in New Delhi, you can see more than 52 degrees. So with hundreds of people died out of the heat, and I think many more even hidden in the statistics. In Hong Kong, we have this long-term warming trend at the observatory since 1884 because of the global warming and also because of urbanization. Our records are actually still away from 52 degrees, but in the past several years, we have already got new records broken, like 36.1 just last year. But for this year, luckily, we haven't got very strong typhoons nearby. So most of the cases, you can see we have very strong typhoons near Hong Kong, especially to our east, bringing very strong continental air, very hot air to Hong Kong, breaking the temperature records. This year, the typhoons either didn't hit us or it's too weak. So not that bad this year. But based on the temperature so far this year, we are likely to see this year will be a record-breaking year for Hong Kong. So how bad in terms of the very hot days, hot nights, and even extremely hot days? You can see that in the past several years, starting from 2020, we have been seeing persistently large number of very hot days, hot nights, and exceeding 50 days per year. So even if you look at the average compared with a century ago, you can see that we are not just 10 times more, but even 50 times more compared to 100 years ago. So a lot of research shows that not just the very hot days are important to health, but the hot nights also, because we can't get rid of the heat at night. We are also surrounded in the urban areas by concrete emitting the heat. So the two together actually will bring a lot of problems to health. So the HKO has been projecting the climate change elements in the years based on the AR, the assessment report of the IPCC, the latest IPCC report 6. I'm not going into the details, but you can check out HKO's website for the projections, temperatures, rainfall, storm surge, whatnot. But where are we heading? This year, before COP, the UN published the latest emission gap report. And this is the result. If all the unconditional NDCs are materialized, we will still see a temperature increase of 2.8 degrees by the end of this century. So not meeting the Paris Agreement target. But I think recently more and more people start even talk about current policies. Why? I think because of the imminent change in the administration in the US. So we might be even be worse, moving backwards rather than moving forward. So in that case, we'll be even seeing 3 degrees increase. Well, let's see. We will have a few months to see whether Trump will pull out from Paris Agreement. But message is very clear from this update. Unless we can deliver everything we have pledged, no matter it's conditional NDC, unconditional NDCs, and all net zero pledges, we will be 100% sure that we cannot miss the 1.5 degree target. So this is the situation today. Well, for Hong Kong, we have to look at several different emission scenarios. The basic scenario should be the intermediate emission pathway, so-called middle road. But if we are not doing more, but to retract, then perhaps we still need to consider the very high emission scenario, which will be even worse. But as a matter of fact, as you can remember, for the number of very hot days these several years, we are already in the 50 days per year zone, and we are actually on this path to reach these values based on the very high emission scenario. So if we can't see the global emission starting to drop, then I think this will be our destination. Well, the HKO has done a lot of research with the academia in Hong Kong about heat. I'm not going to elaborate here, but to point out that we successfully developed a heat index, which is relevant to Hong Kong population. It's basically using the WBGT formulation, similar parameters, but slightly different coefficients. Why? Because we want to apply to the general population, and we use the hospitalization data and check the response. And we see that when this index reaches 29.5 degrees, then we start to see more hospitalization, and the figures will jump even further when we reach 30.5. So these two values, these two thresholds, guide improvement to our heat warning service for Hong Kong. So that's what the observatory has done to make use of these new study, and even because last year we saw too many 35 degrees extreme heat, so they designed yet another level, so-called extreme hot warning. But I don't know how long it will last. I mean, in 10 years' time, maybe it's not 35 degrees, but even more. So let's see. The good thing about HKO is the website, especially the app, the app, is very popular. And so once we issue the warnings, basically everyone in Hong Kong will follow and take the necessary actions. For labor, it's not HKO's turf, but HKO also helped the labor develop this warning for the workers. And so you can see that it's quite similar with 3 tiers. But initially, the launch was last year, but initially it was a little bit, there's some teething problems. So I think this year I got from our experts from the construction industry that this year has been much better and smooth compared with last year. I think one of the main things is where we want, which people most need to be protected. So lots of study highlight that is the core urban areas, which is most affected by heat. And we want to know where they are, and we want to forecast where they are. And so one thing that the Hong Kong UST is doing is try to make use of a high resolution model down to 4 km for the region and down to hundreds of meters, even street levels, to find out where the most vulnerable groups are, so that we can deliver more timely and also more relevant alerts to the users, to the vulnerable groups. So this is the last mile issue, how to reach them. And of course, the science says that we are able to do it using high resolution data, and we can resolve much better, especially for the densely populated Greater Bay Area in Hong Kong. We also have lots of experience. Alexis was the key man in pushing out the high resolution air quality data for specific users like the asthma patients. So that combining technology and also combining users' experience, design, engagement, we're able to do a good job providing relevant information to the most needed. So we want to follow this model, this success story, to do the same thing for heat and others. And as you all know, the UN put early warnings for all this initiative to be the highest priority for the whole world in the next several years. Hopefully, we will get this done by 2027. It's really ambitious. Our country, China, our Vice Premier, Deng Xiaoqiang, he made a very important speech at the COP29, saying that we are going to boost this system and then share information and share the technology. So we are happy that we are part of it, and we are now working and collaborating with all the relevant academia and partners. Hopefully, we will turn all these scientific endeavors and user engagement experience into practical, actionable early warning for all. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks so much, CM. I guess we will have a panel discussion later, and let's hold the question at that point. CM actually talking about the workers and so on. So this is really a good time for Eddie, our second speaker and panelist, really talk about how does this heat in the past summer impact the workers.
Thanks for having me here. I understand there are lots of scientists here, so I can skip all the climate science and talk straight to the contractors' way. So the construction industry has been dealing with this issue long time ago, because heat stress is one of the health and safety risks that to the workers at site, because we employ lots of workers working at the construction site. So you see all these guidelines, some a long time ago. I remember one of the briefing notes they launched is 2011. So we have been tackling this issue a long time ago. So working in hot weather precaution. So there are several forms of heat-related illness, heat rash, cramp, heat exhaustion, heat stroke. So most of the people today, they put all their focus on heat exhaustion and heat stroke. Yeah, how to deal with it. And we understand this heat stroke is a severe medical emergency. So it kills people. So we take it very serious that we need to have a very robust risk assessment and mitigation system to handle this heat stress related risk. So who are at risk? So we also, from a corporate level, we have some approach that review our different people, age group, or different type of people within our workforce who are at risk. So these are some of the type of workers or people that we identify would be at risk. So how about the risk factors? According to the Labor Department guideline, they categorize it as an environmental factor, the workplace factor, and also personal, the people factor. But we just, right now we categorize basically in these 7 risk factors when we carry out our risk assessment at project level. So temperature, humidity, radiation, air movement, all these are the environmental factor. And physical exertion, clothing, and acclimatization, these are some related to the workplace and also the workers factor. So we developed some quick note reminder in case of heat exhaustion or heat stroke, what's the immediate action you should take, because this is very critical when you rescue someone suffer in heat stroke or heat exhaustion. So we disseminate this everywhere, let people educate our project team how to deal with this case under emergency situation. But the most effective way is to prevent this happen. Yeah. So what sort of preventive measures we put in place? First, monitor the physical fitness of our workers and people. Beware of weather conditions, all the heat index, those useful data shared by Hong Kong Observatory, they are very useful to us. Also, appropriate clothing, frequent short breaks, that will relate to the heat index and also the heat stress at work warning system. Because during extreme weather, hot weather condition, we need to impose this kind of short breaks, rest break, during the extreme hot weather. What they call the amber, red, black system, the warning system. So stay hydrated, drink lots of water, and also increase our awareness of workers. In particular, the workers, they have to be aware of this risk of heat stroke and heat stress. So how about at project work site, what kind of preventive measures we will adopt? First of all, it's always a risk-based approach. So we will carry out a risk assessment to perform the assessment by our safety team, identify precautionary measures, and also there is a standardized assessment form right now widely adopted in the construction industry. So everyone uses this standardized approach that we can follow the assessment of risk, heat stress related risk. Then it's all about the monitoring and alerts. So this is what CM just mentioned, the heat index and relate to this heat stress work warning system. I agree. Last year, when Labor issued this guideline, there is some issue the whole industry needs to smooth out, okay? Because it's about the practicality on the side, how you implement this system. So they liaise, they discuss this seriously, and then come up with, like, under Amber system, there is 3 rest breaks. One is in 10 a.m. in the morning, lunch break, and then afternoon they call the tea break. Okay, the 3:15, 3:15, that they take a break. So these are the 3 rest break they develop. If it's a red signal, every break they will increase, they add 15 minutes more in each break. But in the black, you have to stop work. So that's what they agree in the discussion. So then all this is about the hardware, the physical measures, ventilation rest break, spray fans, shelter area, drinking facilities, rest area. Also, whether it's not talking about whether you have provided or not. It's talking about whether it's sufficient provisions on site. Training promotion, raising the awareness of the workers, the project team, the project management, and also emergency respond when there is some heat stroke or heat exhaustion case. So last week, walk the talk. I just use this one of our project, how they walk the talk. You see, they have the regular health check and promotion, increase awareness to check the physical condition of workers. They deploy ice maker, the rest area, and also even provide some free toilets fan mental service for workers. And then they also implement this the heat strap warning system. You see, they even have light here, so quite fancy. So next is some other heat stress promotion. Basically, it's all about how to raise awareness of people and also share some good stuff food during this hot summer. And other hardware, you see the intermediate rest area, locker room, changing room, Shek rest area, some greening on site, and also regular health check. Not only physical, we also care about their mental health check. Yes. So yes, these are some of the measures that the site have been implementing throughout at site level and throughout the contract period. So that's it for my sharing.
Thanks, Eddie. We'll again take the questions later. Now, actually, I think a lot of people talking about the emissions rising, and we always think about the electricity that we're using and contributing to this. But think about if you are in Hong Kong in a hot day without electricity, what could happen? And I think this is so important that we have that demand supply. And here, I think Jim Taylor with CLP is talking about how we fare in this past summer. Okay.
Thank you, Alexis. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for having me this morning. I'm a little bit nervous, unusual for me. I'm a little bit nervous because two previous presentations by Clear Seafoods on the weather side and on the safety side. So I'm going to cover two topics. The first one I'm going to just talk fairly quickly about because you've had some really good input just now from Gammon. But the second one, I'm going to show you some unpublished data. The charts do not have numbers on them for very good reason. But I want to just discuss with you some of those impacts. But let's just begin by looking at heat stress prevention. So we talked about construction sites, but CLP also has a lot of its staff out there because, as Alexis just said, if the power is off, we have to get out in the country and fix the overhead lines or fix the issues that are holding us back from supplying our customers. So we do have a lot of people who are working outside all through the summer. So as Gammon does, we also have lots of risk assessments. We have proper procedures, proper assessments, mitigation measures identified for all of these. You can see some of the same documents that are used. We have a proper corporate health, safety, and environment quality program. So we will do the normal risk assessments. We will have a look at what the likelihood is of these occurring, the proper preparation, mitigation measures, and proper assessment before we begin work. So as with Gammon, we will make sure our colleagues have access to cooling air, to shelter, to water, and proper rest arrangements. Now you might think that fixing overhead power lines 40 feet up in the air is nice and breezy and cool on a hot day, but it isn't. It's quite labor-intensive work. It's quite physical work. So we have to make sure that we do the proper risk assessment, that we actually have the appropriate breaks, we provide the right support to our colleagues to keep the power flowing. So before we take on a major job, as with most other engineering businesses, we will do what we call a pre-work risk assessment. So we will collectively look at the task, the supervisor and the team decide what the conditions are like, consider what work needs to be done, and then actually plan that work in the proper manner. So before we begin, we don't just turn up and get the tools out and get going. We actually think about what we have to do and how best to do it in what can be quite difficult conditions. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about these charts. As I said, it's unpublished data. I'm sure people will use their mobile phones to take pictures, which is why I've not put any scales on this at all. But this is a very simple chart looking at electricity demand on the left-hand side, on the bottom, and on the left-hand side, temperature. Now, you will notice that actually it doesn't do this, because when it gets cold, people put a fan heater in the lounge, or they put a radiator or something else on. So actually, when it gets really, really cold, it doesn't happen very often now, but when it does, I've been in Hong Kong long enough to remember 2 and 3 degrees in Jim Sa Joy before, but that was a few years ago now. But demand goes up a bit. But the real issue is that people just quite comfortable, little bit uncomfortable. Should we put the aircon on? Should we not put the aircon on tonight? Yeah, we maybe better put it on. And then actually when we get home, as the temperature begins to rise, we must definitely put it on the minute we walk in. And at the top end, when you get those run of 35-degree days or 30-degree days, or the 50-odd hot nights that you mentioned, no choice. So you can see there is something of a step change. I'm not going to give you the number, but you can see that people's tolerance. I remember some colleagues, I think we've got 1 or 2 in the audience, former colleagues from the observatory, who would never use aircon. It would just be a fan or a piece of paper. But for most people in Hong Kong, there is a tipping point. When it gets above a certain level, they give in. And it's probably sensible in terms of health that they do. So I have to think about planning for this. Now, I have in Hong Kong more than a dozen generation machines. They don't run all the time. In winter, I run less. In daytime, I run a little bit more than I will at midnight. But I run them mostly when we have our system peak. And increasingly, our system peak is 8 o'clock in the evening. It's not in the middle of the day. When I came to Hong Kong to work for China Light, which is more than 20 years ago, most peaks were in the middle of the day. We had some industry, business, commerce, MTR, but now the peak is in the evening. And that's when you folks go home and you put on the aircon. So I have to work very closely with our colleagues at the HKO, and we do work extremely closely with them to look at longer term, next month, medium term, next week, short term, the next day. And we have to think about typhoons in particular. I'm really glad you made that point earlier on. When the typhoons are to the southeast of Hong Kong, that's when we get the peak demand. You get that really sort of stultifying, hot air, close sort of uncomfortable feeling when the air just doesn't move. And if it's there for 2 or 3 days, it builds. Not a comfortable feeling, and people don't like that. So that's electricity demand. Let's have a look at what that means when the temperatures go up. Now this is over a few years, and there's been a shift in the pattern. So this is by eye, not a mathematical scientific formula, looking at the dots, okay? So for a number of years, you can see a steady sort of trend, but it kicks up. The other thing is that the width for that trend is more narrow here than it is here. And that makes it really difficult for me to plan for electricity demand. Now, I sell a product that you can't see. The only time you notice it is when it isn't there. If you touch it, it will kill you. So I'm not a fancy retailer like Apple, but the job I do is critical to Hong Kong. 60% of all the energy in Hong Kong that's used by the community is electricity. That's one of the highest percentages anywhere in the world. Our reliability is 99.999%. One of the best records anywhere in the world. I have to maintain that. When you flick that switch or put the aircon on, You want it on. I have to make sure that power is available. So planning for this is getting increasingly difficult. I can turn machines on and they can start ramping up, but electricity is a bit different from some other forms of energy. I have to generate it second by second to match the demand. I can store some, but not a lot. Even if I have things like pump storage, when I pull the switch, I turn the generator on, it's not milliseconds, it takes a bit of time. So working with the observatory, looking at the trends, humidity, temperature, the chance of cloud, the chance of rainfall, particularly in terms of those typhoon days, because the minute we get the rain showers, the demand will drop, often within minutes. So I have to look at this really, really carefully, and it's getting much more difficult. So we are using two forms of intelligence to do the forecasting. We're using human intelligence, and I have a guy in our system ops called CM Locke, who is an absolute hero. He is brilliant. We had AI experts trying to match him for 3 years before they could get to his level. But they can now. The second is we're using AI now to refine the process. So complicated and difficult. But the trend is quite clear. It's up. So what that means is I have to have more power plants, I have to have more wires, I have to have more equipment to meet demand. And when we get the electrification of transport, it's even more. So last slide. This is the maximum demand. Now, you mentioned that with the climatic effects, with the warming in the oceans and the cooling in the oceans, that recently we seem to have broken the cycle. It used to be up, down a bit, up, down a bit, up, down a bit. Same electricity demand. Up, stable, up a bit more, bit stable, 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 up a bit more, back a bit, up a bit more. The last few years, no. It's up and up and up. Two reasons. One is the electrification of the economy, and the other is temperature. Now, if I meet those demands, I have to invest in a lot more machinery, and that means higher tariffs. But if I can work with customers and reduce that demand, then I don't have to invest in those machines for just a few hours a year. So actually, we are doing, in CLP, we're about 80% of Hong Kong's electricity supply, better than Singapore, better than many other jurisdictions, because we're working with customers, big and small, to reduce the demand on very, very high demand days. So last year, we ran a test for about 500,000 customers who participated. This year, about 750,000. And that helps us to reduce by hundreds of megawatts the demand. And going forward, we'll do more and more and more. That's an economically very efficient way to make sure we can cope with the demands of heat stress. So that's a very quick flavour, looking from a different perspective on how to deal with heat. Thank you.
That's really interesting on how working with the community on dealing with that. The final speaker or panelist today is Dr. David Bishai, really talking more from a health perspective, how to take action on heat death in Hong Kong. Yeah, David, Chris?
Thank you so much. So I come from public health, and we are transitioning to the post-COVID world and noticing that there is a pandemic now, and we don't have to wait for disease X to come. We have a problem everywhere every summer of heat deaths, and the charts you just saw are that it's growing. Now, when public health people talk about a pandemic or an epidemic, generally, I think a lot of us want to cause fear, but I think I don't. Honestly, that's counterproductive. I think this meeting today, we really have a great reason to hope that the human race can rise to this challenge and solve the problem I'm about to talk to you about. So I'm not here to scare you, not here to send you the charts that give you paralysis and fear, but to inspire you with how solvable and how we have the solution at our hands. And I think our keynote speaker will help to emphasize this point in just a few minutes. So back to where I'll be going today. We'll talk about the problem. We'll talk about a solution that we in this room own. We can do this, and we will talk about that during our morning. and I'll talk about my profession's role and what public health can offer us. So first, the problem is quantifying the heat-related death burden. What we saw just a few minutes ago in Eddie's talk was one industry that's being profoundly hit by this and responding to the problem. They quantify it in terms of the condition called heat stroke, which is a syndrome that a doctor can diagnose with vital signs and clinical observations. And they see that and they respond to it. That's only a part of the global burden of heat deaths. Most heat deaths are not in outdoor workers because most people are not outdoor workers. They're just people. We know that very much like COVID, which was the thing that killed older people, people with cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, heat does the same thing. It picks off the vulnerable and gives them an early death. And that's where these deaths come from. So our epidemiologists, people like our own Professor Chao Ren and others, they go and take the daily temperature series, and you can take the mean, the minimum, the maximum, add humidity, add the number of days, add the nighttime heat, many different formulas as the determinants of death, and many different types of death. Is it non-injury death? Is it injury deaths? Heart disease, and so on. And so all of those studies have been done. So my group at the School of Public Health took those relative risks. When you do a study like that, with a time series, you're going to get how much more deaths do we see on a hot day than on an average day. Many of those studies have done that. The relative risks run a range from 1.2, 1.4, based on how you define what the heat treatment is. Is it maximum, minimum, mean, how many days, and so on. So we looked at several different types of heat exposure: the daily average, the daily maximum, the daily minimum, and a combination. And these were different papers that have come. These are all Hong Kong papers. And then we used a formula to convert the relative risk, the 1.2s and 1.4s, into how many people died. Because I think we need that number of how many deaths are we talking about in order to actually scare people and get our leaders to say, oh my goodness, this is actually killing a lot of people. And once we say that, we can't get action. So we're trying to get a little bit of fear, but at the same time say we can solve this because we can. So this is the equation that we used, and we used the data sources from Hong Kong. We multiply these relative risks times the average daily death count, and now you know how many people are going to die because you have this extra death count across your average death count. So here's our estimates. We have here 4 different estimates of what the excess deaths would be. It's awful small, but this one is 1455 if we use the average temperature. With the max temperature, the estimate is 2,000, and with the minimum temperature, 1,500 deaths over 10 years. So the 10-year death count is running something between 1,455 to 3,000 deaths in 10 years. It sounds like not a lot of death, but if we do the typical, how many deaths per 100,000 is this, we get a number that is now rivaling diabetes in terms of numbers of deaths per 100,000. So it's climbing, and based on what you saw from CM, it's going to get higher unless we do something. I think we will do something, and I think this number will stop growing, but we have to do something. And so what do we do to stop this excess heat death burden? Pretty simple. You get people not to be exposed to the heat. And I think it's going to take China Light and Power to help fire up some air conditioners, but not that many if we do this properly. It doesn't have to be only air conditioners. And we're going to hear from Jason in a few minutes how a comprehensive plan can help us survive. So, preventable. From the perspective of public health, we can observe this risk to us and look at communities around the world that have brought in solutions to it, but we have to work together. And this working together to think about what are the pieces. One of the pieces is an early warning system. We do need meteorological early warnings. We need our medical providers to be on our team. And I don't know how many of you or your parents have gone to a doctor for high blood pressure or diabetes and not heard a thing about heat. I know I've seen it in my family. The doctors are not yet on board. And that's one part of planning, to get them on board. we have to work on mitigation, on our housing and our urban planning, and then the social systems. We have so many social systems that can help be part of the solution, but we have to plan. So the next step forward is to look at cities that have planned, and Ahmedabad, New York, Adelaide in Australia, so many of them have produced a local city-based heat health action plan, and the literature shows that these work. In Ahmedabad, they were able to reduce the relative risk of death by 50%. Same in New York, they were able to reduce the death count by 0.8 deaths per day during a heat wave and save lives. So planning does work. The evidence shows that it does. We have to start planning. So Hong Kong can and should develop its own local heat health action plan. The way to do that is what I call Public Health 3.0. Our field says our future relies on public health officers finding a way to bring the community together to co-create a plan. It doesn't have to be the same as something happening in Geneva or Paris. It needs to be a Hong Kong plan, but we have to get together. And what I see in this room are the ingredients for the plan. What we need next is a convening force, somebody to tell us to get together, bring us together to make our plan and get us to work together. And that would look like leadership. So I want to thank you and I look forward to our discussion.
Really a good sum up and really a good start for our panel discussion. I hope that this is more a question from the floor, but to start with, actually, we talked about this summer. Actually, just I find one question for the speaker is, what are the key questions you think we have learned in this summer that you want the audience to really grab for their planning or their action? So just maybe since Eddie has the mic, why don't we just go go past that way?
Like my slide, too hot to tolerate. So in particular, those workers on site, they're exposed to the outdoor, to the sunshine. So we put lots of effort to take care of our workforce, because right now it's not the climate resilience, basically not only the physical asset, but also the worker resilience that can withstand this kind of hot weather. So we honestly, we put quite a lot of focus on to implement all the measures I just mentioned, to make sure the site really implement those measures. But I see one thing is, in Hong Kong, I'm not blaming anyone, but always the people at site level, we are always being put to the limit to catch up the program and progress of the work. So should we consider whether we can develop sensible and reasonable program when we plan our works, okay? In order not to rush at the end and put all the limit to the site workers and site people. That's something we may discuss.
Okay, implementation and plan, but not plan and implementation, but that's interesting.
Yeah, for me, I think my takeaway from this year is I mentioned up front that our temperatures see a big gap this year since June last year, and this gap is not closing. So the warming seems to have been taken to another level, which is not going to come down anytime soon. And people are, I think now the awareness of the impact of climate change has been higher than before, not just because of the temperatures, but also because of the black rainstorm last year. So I think we have to get prepared in all walks of life. We don't know where we are heading, actually, because if you just remember earlier this month, we saw 4 typhoons over the Pacific Ocean, which is the first time ever since we have the satellite technology. So I've tried to understand this myself and just written an article. Even though I'm not fully convinced that the sea surface temperature is the culprit, but most likely than not, the sea surface, the warm sea surface temperature is the reason, a very important reason. And I mentioned about La Nina. Normally the La Nina will bring us a little bit of cooling effect. But this year, the pattern is actually La Nina. Why we have so many typhoons at the end of this typhoon season, at the end of this year? This is La Nina. But the temperature is so high that it's obscured the La Nina pattern. So I don't know in the future how we call this. This is kind of a warmed La Nina. Yeah. So yeah, that's all for me.
I think for me, what I would say is that we have to think long term. So this summer has not been a particularly hot year for CLP, but doesn't mean to say that next year isn't going to be red hot. And that just gives me 12 months or now 8-9 months to prepare. So I really have to keep working at it all the time. So I think be flexible, be adaptable, work with our other stakeholders, input, information, planning, forecasting, all good, but also with our customers to try and see if we can mitigate those impacts. But we have to think for the longer term how we're going to do this. And the simple fact is that I don't want to, in meeting extra electricity demand, actually make the problem worse. Because if I'm burning coal every day and I'm burning more coal to meet higher temperatures, it's not a good loop. So actually, we're already reducing our carbon footprint in CLP significantly. Today, my footprint is lower than Japan, lower than Singapore, much lower than Australia, a little bit more than the UK, but not by a lot. So the government has a climate action plan for 2050, and I'm proud to say I work with government on that. And we are looking now at how we can have the next stage of decarbonisation to drop my carbon footprint by about 2/3 to 3/4 inside 10 years. So hopefully I'm not going to make the problem worse.
Thank you. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and say something I learned this summer. And what I learned was during the Olympics. I think we give a lot of credit to our star Olympic athletes and the medals that they won. They deserve most of the credit, but the other part was this was deliberate, wasn't it? Hong Kong had a plan on how to increase its success at the Olympics. And they put in force measures to find top talent and to groom it over years. Planning works. And yes, we got lucky with some great athletes, but let's take credit for Hong Kong's ability to put together a plan, put its mind to something and to achieve it. And that's what I think we can learn from planning to win Olympics, and we'll keep doing that.
Well, very good. Actually, I just want to see if there's any question before I find my second one. Because really this is a good discussion that we want to get.
Thank you, Richard Fielding. I want to ask a question of Editor and ask about why Hong Kong still does not have a policy for insulating buildings. Because we know that the built section of Hong Kong is the biggest embodiment of carbon. I mean, this building, ironically, is a very good example. It's not that the technology is not good, it's that there is no mandate to put insulation in residential premises, which would reduce the demand during the summer and in the winter. And it's such a simple expedient to introduce, but for 25 years, I've been writing to the government, SCMP, saying, why don't we just change the building regulations? The building industry can do this. Just like the government listens to industry. It doesn't listen to little people like me. It listens to industry. And if industry makes the demand and says, look, we can do this relatively low cost, maybe 0.5% extra on top of the cost, it's doable, but it needs to be pushed by industry. So I would ask, what's industry's plan in this regard, if they have one?
It's a very good question. We always ask this question, why we have so many facade curtain wall in this way. You don't need a sophisticated HVAC system if you can do smarter in the building envelope that reduce the heat gain of the building. So as simple as that. So basically it's some architectural design that can help reduce the cooling or heat load of the building, as simple as that. We should put our focus in here, not those so sophisticated HVAC systems. So that's my feeling. So, but as a builder or as a contractor, not every time we will be involved in the design that works. But we try our best to influence our clients and designer to consider this kind of concept and measures that you can put in place. I think we can start with some pilot, or not a mega development, but some pilot project. Like I pushed very hard is on the timber used as a structure instead of some form work. So it will also help on the overall building indoor environment, also the thermal performance. So there are a whole bunch of new things that we can adopt. But I see on the private sector, they're willing to try it, but they need to deal with the buildings department in Hong Kong, that they are very tough to deal with. Yeah, so I don't mind saying this, okay? But that is an obvious reason that they need to go. If government project, they don't need to go through BD, but still we need some people in the department that are willing to consider this kind of think out of box issues. Yeah, but I see it's more coming. And one more point I'd like to point out is, I see the One Bureau, they set up the Building Technology Research Institute. That may be something we can tap into to try something new. Yeah.
Actually, a number of us was in Singapore this April, and we really, in a lot of the building, we noticed the ventilation, the structure are much more, I would say, energy-friendly. And that's maybe something that Jason can enlighten us a little bit later. But that's certainly something we also feel that is quite important. And I actually think that government need encouragement to do good things. Yeah. And how to do that is we can talk more in the later part. But anyway, any further?
This summer, I visited the substandard and people living in substandard accommodation, and I found out that even if you give them an air conditioner, they won't switch it on because they don't have the money. So it seems that we need a solution. I mean, for helping them, a solution which would not involve air conditioning. And some people tell me it is only fans. And I see them cooling themselves with a fan, but sweating. And these old people, they say it's okay. They don't realize that it is actually hazardous to their health. So we need to find solutions which involve ventilation, forced or natural. But I really don't know how the building industry or the COP and your friend over there, whether you might be interested in helping to develop a solution which involves fans, not air conditioning. Yeah.
Maybe I can begin. I think there is a lot we already do for customers in those circumstances. I think we welcome the recent announcements on the policy address with a new direction, which is a start. So we have a number of programs that we run. We run them with local NGOs. We don't necessarily know where all these subdivided units are. Nobody says, this address is a subdivided unit. So what we will do is we will offer some subsidies. We will offer some financial help. We also have done a new program this year for the spaces that the government's created for families to take a bit of time out of the subdivided unit, the community facilities where they're in the local areas where they can go and the kids can do their homework, they get a bit of relief because they've got aircon and so on. We're providing some appliances for free for transitional housing and so on. So there's a lot that we can do. Fundamentally, I would like to be able to see that every subdivided unit had an electricity meter, and then we can work on a slightly lower rate because lower consumption customers get a cheaper rate from us. But because the landlord is taking supply in a higher volume, it's a higher rate. That was done to effectively send a price signal to customers that the more you use, the more you pay. So that's good from an environmental point of view, but it backfires in the sense of the subdivided units. But I can't force landlords to let me fit a meter. I can't. I try through every means I've got to try and work with the local NGOs, the local community, and try and persuade them to do that, but I can't at the moment force them to do that. But I welcome the changes the government's brought in. I think that will help. It's a start, it's not the end game. So I think I'll defer to other colleagues in terms of some of the more social and behavioural aspects.
Well, I think you just nailed a point right there, that if we had a task force in Hong Kong, we could have a conversation between Housing Authority and China Light and Power about where are the subdivided plants, because Housing Authority knows and CLP can be part of the solution. An example of why getting a group together can be a step forward.
Okay, I see earlier.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for Mr. Jim Taylor from CLP. In your presentation, you mentioned the electricity demand, the range is wider. That means actually the uncertainty is increasing. So in that case, we know in Hong Kong, not all the electricity comes from local. Quite a large part from Guangdong province, nuclear power station. So my question is, for handling this kind of uncertainty, does Hong Kong have ability to handle it by ourselves, or actually handle this kind of uncertainty quite depends on another region, for example, Great Bay Area? Thank you.
That's a really, really smart question. We are doing an awful lot of work on exactly that. So there's two issues. We've got to keep supply and demand in balance, second by second, or the frequency will be out of whack. So can we manage demand? We could work with customers. Can they turn back at a key time? So as I mentioned, we do a lot of demand response work, not just with residential customers, but with some of the major government departments, for example. So for your water supplies, the water largely is pumped in from Guangdong. It's pumped into reservoirs, and then it has low pressure distribution systems in Hong Kong. Do they need to pump that minute at the time of the maximum peak demand? No, they don't. So I will pay them not to do it. On the supply side, we have a number of resources that we can call. So for example, from Guangdong, we take nuclear power. So actually today, 1 in 4 of these lights is already zero carbon. It's powered by diobey. So what we do is at night, the output from the nuclear plant is fairly constant. So we actually have a pump storage reservoir in Guangdong, and I pump water uphill. And then when it's really, really hot, I open the valves, the water comes down through the turbines, and I get extra power pretty quickly. Hong Kong is now one of the best places in the world for EVs. We're not there yet because the manufacturers don't provide necessarily all the infrastructure, but that's a huge battery system. And actually, when people get home with their car parked underneath the residence and they go into the flat and turn the aircon on, do they need that car battery working right then? No, they don't. Could I actually pay them to let me drain that battery a little bit, and then 3 or 4 hours later, then I can pump it back up again when demand across the commercial sector has dropped? Yes, I'm looking at that really, really hard right now. So not just on the physical asset side and the power flow side, but also on demand side, and particularly how we do the forecasting. If I suddenly get a 39-degree nighttime temperature and I don't know about it, I'm going to be struggling to catch up. But if I know a day or two in advance, I can have the reservoir in Guangdong full. I can actually have a demand response program going with WSD, DSD, other government departments. I can manage it. I'm actually pretty confident. Our record so far suggests that we can. I mean, we talked about black rain a second ago. How many people were off power supply in black rain? Tiny, tiny number. Because we flood-proof the substations, because we get ready, because we do the planning, as you say. We work with government, with other departments. So I'm actually reasonably comfortable. But I don't want to be complacent. It's not going to get any easier. It's going to get more difficult. So we just got to keep at it.
Okay, thanks. I get the signal from our ladies that we need to finish. But before that, I really want everyone to comment on one thing, basically brought up by David. I think how to strengthen cross-sector collaboration so that we can better deal with this. I want everyone to have the final say on that.
I can think of one is 3 or 4 years ago, we worked with Business Development Council to have a campaign called Power Up Coalition. So we work closely with the power company. The ultimate goal is to electrify our construction site as soon as possible. So to get the grid power, we cannot work on our own. We need to work with our clients, our customer, power company, and even the cable laying company. So make sure get the electricity as early as possible. But we also think of what Jim mentioned is the energy demand side. We always aware our peak demand, so that's why we will, once we get the grid power, we think of using the power bank, the battery energy system, to store energy so that to flatten our energy demand curve. And we grew up closely with power company so that because they incentivize us to do it. So that's a very good collaboration.
To me, I hope that we will have more engagement with the health sector, and of course, Professor Bishai has shared with us many of his very useful thoughts. But so far, we haven't got too many successes here in Hong Kong in engaging our authorities in the government. Yeah, but next year, I think that there's good news that I have been invited to be a speaker on their first, I think, symposium on climate change, and also the sustainability and carbon neutrality committee also is organizing another one in January. So things start to move. So I hope that we will be able to pull together all the stakeholders and get us moving forward.
So I'll just say 2 things very quickly. One, events like today, they're helpful to share knowledge, share experience, share understanding, and build a collective move to tackle some of these issues. Secondly, personally, I don't find government unresponsive. I do the investment plans for CLP Power. I've done the last 2 covering 10-year periods. Government doesn't want to increase investment too much because it impacts on tariff, but they are reasonable. If you make a good enough case with good evidence, then they will agree. And the third thing I would say is that we have to always look, as an engineering business, at the science that underlies the issues. And we are so lucky, the team at HKUST are one of the best in the world. And that man in particular, who I've known for a very long time, is one of the best individuals in the world at helping us to look ahead to see what's coming and be better prepared for it.
Thanks. I think we're about to do one of the next things we're going to do is have a break and meet each other and build relationships. So I think we should just get to doing that and trust each other to take the next step.
Well, thanks a lot, and particularly thanks for Tim.
Alexis, I just want to make a quick echo with the data sharing stuff. I have to admit that Hong Kong certainly have been doing a great job on data sharing. It's very useful to make use of those data to inform decisions at site level. I hope to see more data sharing platform in future. I see government, they have already established something called the Common Data Spatial Infrastructure that you can tap into all the climate data. And on the AFCD or EPD, they already have some good web-based map platform to indicate all the nature and biodiversity. These are very good examples that we can share the data for industry use. And this is very useful, I would say.
Yeah, thanks, Eddie, for bringing that point, because I always believe in when we look at development of different technology, even the private sector, the US open data policy was very important for their business to take advantage and really do things. And on this part, we actually have Freedom of Access Act in Hong Kong, but I think we need to really do more sharing, how to encourage more departments to share their data. With that, thanks a lot for the panel. But don't go away, just a short break. We'll do your connection. We have a keynote on the experience in Singapore, and a lot information. We visited Jason in April, and I'm really impressed by what he was talking about, and that's why I invite him here. And really, let's come back in 5 minutes, and then we'll start the session again. Thanks.
Great, thank you. We're going to start the second part of the morning. But before I introduce our keynote, I'd like to show you a very short video.
We are the boiling frogs. We are being cooked very slowly, and we are not even aware that we are being cooked. This year, we hit a 40-year record at 37 degrees Celsius. And bear in mind, in our context, it's not just about a high temperature. It's also about the high humidity. It is a problem that everyone will feel in the broader society. It's not climate change, it's climate crisis because we are right in the midst of it.
My name is Charles, and I'm a full-time food delivery rider. Every day I work for about 10 to 12 hours. So under the sun, every day, non-stop. During really hot days, it's really, really tiring. So after work, I don't really have the energy to spend time with my kids.
As we near the thresholds of human limits, any small increase makes a difference because at some point you can no longer lose the heat that you produce. Our leeway is getting tighter and tighter. And being in Singapore, I'm very proud that we are always proactive. No, we do not want to wait when 40 degrees Celsius comes and then we ask ourselves, what should we do? The Heat Resilience and Performance Center is where we want to partner the best in class locally, regionally, and globally to undertake research and innovations to augment heat resilience, profiling different populations to understand their vulnerability. So using science and technology, we'll be able to quantify core temperature continuously in real time. Doing so, we can understand the impacts. We can also prescribe very targeted solutions to reduce heat strain. We harness an array of techniques. For example, we use the ingestible temperature capsule. You can swallow it the day before or the morning if your profiling commences at night. That allows us to capture thermal strain continuously, incorporates with heart rates, that is a measure of cardiovascular strain. Put the two together, you get an overall physiological strain. In tandem, we also put on a watch and there was an eye button, and that allows us to look at their skin temperature. In terms of real-time monitoring, we also want to build algorithms so that we can estimate heat strain non-invasively, and then very targeted solutions can be recommended. This job of delivery is of concern. You have factors that will result in a high heat strain or a hot body that we want to avoid. The impacts are impaired decision making. You might make a mistake and therefore accidents will happen. For Charles, moving ahead, I think we should have a sensor that when it crosses a certain threshold, there could be alert sent to the rider and say you probably have to take more rest, hydrate yourself before you get overheated.
Method to advise riders how to reduce heat inside them is a good thing for us.
That is how we envisage as we move forward. Don't assume a one size fits all. You must have a very targeted approach.
A good example would be people with hypertension, maybe on beta blockers. And these are a group of medication that may potentially affect the capacity of the individual to sweat. And in diabetes patients, their ability to drink water in response to dehydration can be affected. And because of that, they can easily get dehydrated, and that state itself put them at risk for heat-related injuries.
Solutions could be very creative. Future mobile cooling center during periods of high heat stress. So let's tackle the problem upstream and not just be reactive. What we are doing here, a large part is the adaptation arms. We are buying time with these adaptation tools and solutions, pushing the boundary, right? Humans still need to survive right now, and that is essentially the mandate of what we are doing here. Welcome back here again. 50, it's really high. Yeah. It's not good just to live a life. We want them to enjoy their work out there. Solutions take time, but I'm an optimist. With science and technology, that is where we should push the boundary to augment heat resilience. And this is especially important in a warming world that we are experiencing.
So I hardly need to introduce Dr. Jason Lee, but I do want to say, because I think, Alexis, you mentioned that last year, several of us went to Singapore to see what Singapore was doing. So one of the most interesting visits for me was having a long chat with Jason at his office, and then afterwards he took us to that center that you saw where somebody was on a machine. So it was very heartening to see that the way that we're going to have a lot more understanding on the details. But very inspired about one message coming from several speakers today is that we have to do this together. We can plan short, medium, and longer term, and it is possible to bring people together. So I can't think of anyone better to energize us here and share his knowledge than Jason.
Good morning. I was asked to stand on this part. This is the best angle, I was told. Hong Kong is special to me in one way because this is the first country I traveled to about 25, 30 years back. I remember I came here with my fiance then, now my wife, to get winter clothing before I head to the UK. So I remember it's quite hard to get winter clothes in Singapore, just for information. And you'll get even harder as the world warms. So yeah, it's great to be back. Last trip here was 2018. Do you remember CM having this? There was a global heat health information forum, and at the end of my deck, you'll see there will be advertisement to welcome you to Singapore next month because we're going to organize the next edition right in Singapore. This is a 20 minutes talk, and I'll just give a quick overview. And I'm really looking forward, not now, but afternoon. I was told there will be a detailed engagement, a lot of details to be shared. It all depends what is your goalpost. Our goalpost is no one should die of heat injury. No one. It's 100%, not 99%. It's 100% preventable. Okay, so I want you to take that first message. And underpinning all we do, this is a great start. And then I'm quite sure that as you look back, sessions like these, is such a key enabler to bring different sectors and even the communities. Ask them how do you perceive heat, but more importantly, empathy. I ask for empathy. For you to be sitting here, right? You don't belong to the group that is vulnerable. We are the privileged one. Although I operate in Singapore, from Singapore, I hardly spend time in Singapore these days. Yeah, we are quite blessed in many ways, and therefore the least we could do is to push out the knowledge out of Singapore, not to Hong Kong. We learn a lot from Singapore, but to me, the Southeast Asians. Sometimes I feel embarrassed when I go in and talk about climate change. You look at me and say, young man, we have old problems unresolved. One is climate change, malnutrition, air pollution. your heat problem probably will go right down there. But I politely respond, they say, with new awareness of climate change, global warming, perhaps it can bring about new resources to solve your old problems. I may be biased, right? But the heat has a direct impact on human health, potential, and well-being. How you exercise, how you sleep, how you eat are all underpinned in thermal regulation. I'm a thermal physiologist, so there's a level of biasness here, but I hope to convince you. I'm just a communicator. This is the team, 40 plus. We are recruiting aggressively, likely based on projection, we need 100, not to do the work in Singapore, because we took out a mandate from WHO, WMO, to be the Southeast Asian Heat Health Hub. Heat Resilience Performance Center is a research platform, but the hub is not. The hub is capacity building communication. Also, we need more people to come on board. So if you fancy sometime in Singapore, do get in touch. I hope last year you heard UN SecGen has said it's no longer global warming. We have moved to the next phase, and the earlier presentation has anchored that it's global boiling now, and therefore I coin ourselves the boiling frogs. You heard about the boiling frogs analogy? Do you sell frog porridge here? Very popular event in Singapore. We're being cooked very slowly. It's not about the 1.5, 3 degrees. Those are important, right? But the fluctuations, the up and down, each has its unique implications. Or if you don't like boiling frogs, you can say we are in the smelly room. When you first enter a room that stinks, after a while you get used to it. Not so smelly anymore. But the stench is there, but you just get used to it. So when your leeway is very tight, right, just a little bit of perturbations, you feel a lot. In Singapore, not as if before this climate change conversation, we were cool and comfortable. It was always warm and humid. But why are we complaining more these days? Because our leeway is getting tighter and tighter. Based on our geography, we don't expect that 5, 10 degrees increase, like what you see in global north. But when your leeway is tight, a small increase makes huge difference. Just a couple of months back, SecGen pushed out another report, a call for action. I work very closely with the occupational sector, Eddie's kind of work, because I think that is one sector that is hugely vulnerable. So again, see from their perspective, it's complex. Depends whether your work is being paid by piece or paid by the fixed salary. We want to push attention more to our platform workers. Because no point in telling them, say, if you don't do this, your risk of getting heat injured will increase. If I'm the platform workers, I say that, I'm telling you, Jason, if I don't do this, it's no longer a risk. I'll bring less bread and butter back home at the end of the day. So thank you for your education. I will take that risk. See? So I saw insurance here, and we have a conversation with the Swiss Re, Prudential, and the insurers potentially could be an enabler. So we need a whole of society, whole of government's approach to tackle this wicked problem. Many reports out there, but if I may point your attention to the Lancet countdown, various indicators, you're welcome to introduce new indicators. One conversation I would like to have is potentially, right now there is Asia additions, but that is largely China focused. But we want to talk about how about Southeast Asia, East Asia, because heat is very contextualized. Policy is good, it must be there, but policy alone is insufficient. But I'm going to be very excited here about the community effort, how we bring about. And I had a conversation from a gentleman there, and we need to ask what is the basis of those sweating when the fan is being blown at you. If I heard it correctly, that is not so good for health. What is the basis? Also, a lot of this, we need to understand from the recipient's perspective. There's some religious beliefs, they say the traditional and cultural practices. I do a lot of work in cooling interventions. There's no point for me to tell my grandma, my late grandma, say cold water and cold showers are good during hot days. She will say that, what have you been learning in school? That is totally wrong, I said, no, my grandma, this is right. We have 10 papers just published, peer-reviewed some more. Say, no, young man, cold shower and cold drinks are bad. She might be arguing and justifying from a traditional medicine perspective. Say, you're messing up my yin and yang, the qi is now unbalanced. No, you are little boy. So you see, we need to understand from their perspective, who do they listen to? Maybe traditional Chinese physicians, let's have those conversations. I'm a physiologist, so I give you the ABC how human responds to heat, right? So in the compensable state, this is what happens. Now you will sweat a bit, you will push your skin blood flow, your heart rate needs to increase to sustain that requirement. Most of the time, you can sustain this. But when you enter into what we call the uncompensable state, right, you will continue to shun that blood onto the skin. Your heart rate now needs to supply blood flow to both the skin flow and also your vital organs. If this persists at some point, you will call this leakage from your guts. The toxins that are supposed to be within your guts get leaked out. That's where each of these phases, cooling must come in. If you don't drive this whole progress, will enter the stage where you go bonkers right now, red alerts, inflamed responses. Eventually, one organ will fail after another, and you get heat stroke at the end of the day. So it says, right, when you hear about somebody died immediately from heat, unlikely that is the case. It could be cardiac arrest. It could be now there are some evidence suggesting heat-induced cardiac arrest. See heat as a stressor. Heat usually kills you. Heat stroke usually kills you a few days, a few weeks later because it goes through a process. So I know reporters like to say when an athlete collapses, dehydration, getting heat stroke. Some of these things might not be evidence-based. Everyone who finished a marathon should be dehydrated in the first place. But the person didn't measure those who are healthy and measure those who are ill and therefore concluded that dehydration kills. Not true, because I can tell you in endurance races in Singapore, we are seeing many casualties in the medical tent. Surprise, surprise, they were there because of water intoxication, not dehydration. The fear of getting heat injured make them drink a lot more. Could be a Singaporean thing. For those of you who have been to Singapore, Singaporeans are notorious. Like you say, 1 cup is good. I say 1 cup is good. 3 cups safer. Let's go for 5 cups every day. Now we have this kiasu. It is a Oxford kind of in English. We always tend to take things a little bit more than what is recommended. So heat, humidity, sustained exposure is our context. It might not be your context. So it's very nuances. This means, right, you hardly see heat death in Singapore. And that is exactly the reason why the government didn't take response for the longest time. Because we look at the literature dominated by Global North research and say that mortality is a key outcome. And we conclude that Singaporeans are heat acclimatized. Must be, because we hardly die of heat injury. Until somebody profiled Singaporeans and said, typical average Joe or Jane in Singapore spend 97% of our time indoor in Singapore. So how can we be heat acclimatized? We are very good in escaping from the heat. Therefore, there's no such concept as incidental physical activity. I walked today, 10 minutes from train station. It is a privilege to walk outdoor. In Singapore, you don't do that. If we do that, they say you must be an expat, right? You must be in Sweden for a long time. And we laugh at them, saying, no, this cannot be. This must be the Amors, cannot be Singaporean. Lack of physical activity itself is a risk factor. Poor physical health, mental health. How about eye health? 9 out of 10 Singaporeans are myopic or residents in Singapore. Or we can go on talk about chronic kidney disease. So of those things that if you don't go about uncovering them, you won't discover much. From a construction perspective, means that this building will take a bit longer to be constructed. I will show some data. Heat can affect your decision making, risk perception leading to accidents. So don't just quantify from a heat productivity. The longer the project goes, the more uncomfortable it is, right? You will tend to take more risk. Also we need to quantify those. If not, at the end of it, you want the CEO or the chairman to make investment for cooling measures, right? Now you need to see from their perspective. They say, again, I have many problems to solve. You tell me why should I invest in this beyond empathy? I will show data say actually investment in heat in the occupational sector is not just about empathy, it's good for business. There's this assumption that say, no, this conversation is about don't profit so much, profit lesser, give more welfare to the workers. No, the data is saying invest in those cooling measures is good for welfare and good for business. If that's the case, why not? So if I'm a chairman there, I say invest more. Also, those myths we ought to debunk with data. So this is our family portrait. We are the boiling frogs. So these are the three outcomes I talk about. Usually we heard about heat injury. There's also space, again, not in occupational setting. Now we are also using heat as a eustress and not always a distress. Heat absorption. I know you go all the way to ICD, CDC, WHO will give you that typical classification. But careful, that's where I thought science can come in. There are two kinds of facts you see in the world. One is by a series of good research. The other category is somebody said it once, 1,000 repeated it, and nobody challenged that. It becomes a fact. Like 8 glasses of water a day. There's no single study that has been done. These are just sayings. So some say Grandmother Smith. Grandmother is usually right. I'm not saying grandmother always say the wrong thing. But we need to challenge what is the scientific basis. Also, accidents is one I want to highlight. Climate-derived heat stress advisory is useful predominantly for in heat space for classical heat stroke. So it works very well for the very young infants or infants, young children, and for the elderly. One of the pain points why the constructions don't think this is very useful because the epidemiological data are not supporting when it's very hot, I get more heat injury because there are other drivers at play. In the control group in Project Heat Safe, I can tell you, when the weather gets very hot, because the pain model is a fixed sum, the workers slow down. You don't have to give the workers rest for them to rest, right? Nobody can stop them from going to the toilets. So during the control arm, we suddenly see, how come we got so much to pee? You say, well, they don't give me rest, but they can't stop me from going to the toilet. So huge presentism. But you put in another context for platform workers, when the temperature goes up, they want to be paid equally the same. And therefore, the health risk will increase accordingly. How do you? Because it's not you say, productive is maintained. No, you eat into other systems. Therefore, the conversation with other ministries, it might not play out in our case, Ministry of Manpower. It can be play out in the Ministry of Health. And therefore, Ministry of Health, you better pay attention because the ambulance rate will increase, your hospitalization, and we know they have a burden on its own without this heat conversation. And therefore, the investment made is not because for the Ministry of Manpower's land, it cut across other society, which means more ambulances will be activated. And you go and quantify in other ways, if the father or the mom is the sole breadwinner, if he gets sick and injured, huge implications on the family. As the more about quantifying it, then you say, wow, this upfront investment, the preventive is so worth it. Also need to say from a broader, don't cut us out artificially. We are organized in ministry sectors, but we are humans. It could be a laborer, but after 6 p.m., you'll be the father. You saw that clip. It's not just about the work demands. If he doesn't feel comfortable, go back home. This dad can get frustrated. No time for the children, causing family issues, domestic violence. See, I can go on. There's huge cascading implications. Don't cut it. It's not that straightforward. But this also presents an enabler. Depends who you are. I'm telling our athletes, when it's hot right now, because I'm after inducing a swim, I can use heat as a eustress and not a distress. So maybe Asians, right, we are all workaholics. You don't have to do your 40 minutes walk or run. 20 minutes right at noon will derive the same cardiovascular strain and give you the same physiological adaptation. Or do you need us to do a couple of studies and say, you walk 3 times in noon, you get prettier and more handsome, and therefore next day you see people coming out to walk. We need to change behaviors, not just putting out signs. So what does it take for you to take actions? Remember, right, knowing doesn't mean doing. Also, we need the behavior and implementation scientists to step forward. So if I do a poll right now, who believes in climate change, I'm quite sure many hands will be raised. I say, who wants to do something about climate change? I hope your hands will remain. Then I get a detector and a detective to follow you, and the report say, no, they're just talking and one thing, not many are doing anything towards climate change. And so what does it say? We have learned before, how to get medical screening. No, until you get sick, you won't see the doctor. Tobacco, give you gory photos in the secret package. Say no, because the price I'm going to pay is downstream. So do we need some carrots, some stick? Also need to hack all the sciences together before we can truly effect knowledge into the society. I put a list, and for you to fill out, there are a lot more other implications that we could to quantify. It's not just about mortality and morbidity. I briefly talk about physical activity, myopia, different sectors, chronic heat exposure. Heat cut across the whole society, from epidemiological data, males' fertility, maternal health, thermal comfort, learning in school, all sorts of occupation, aging, disabled. I have a soft spot, for our pets. I don't know why husky is still in Singapore, but we need signs to ban huskies. They are being adopted in Singapore. When huskies are barking in Singapore, we told the owner it's not barking. Your puppy is cursing at you, and I say, why do you bring me to Singapore to suffer? We talk about One Health. It's not, and I heard, I'm not sure, they say these days the young people do not want to have children anymore, and they are adopting pets as their new form of children. I'm not sure. And also you have to take one. I still encourage you to have humans now, but if you don't want, take care of your pets. And we begin to see some data to suggest that this resident of the apartment could go to work and turn the aircon on. Why? Because the pet is at home. And then induce another vicious cycle, another contributor. Now the humans are not in the apartment, but my husky is in there. He needs the aircon, so I'll turn it on. So there are a lot of cascading implications, but a lot to elaborate on, but I shall not for this short presentation. So I'll just highlight one. See, that's where the partnership of epidemiology and physiology is just one classic example, because the trend is clear, from aggression, risk-taking. So we want to break it down and say, okay, we see some sickness here, and now as crime scene investigator, we go and probe what exactly is happening. So we saw the study many years that show that when you're hot, your risk perception can be affected, which means the risk is there, now you're hot, the risk is no longer that risky, and therefore you don't have that corresponding action. That is bad, huh? When the risk is there, you must perceive the risk correctly, and therefore the right actions can be taken. But now when you're hot, no, somehow the risk disappear or get attenuated. It's almost like now you are a worker again, operating in a hot room, 10 years of experience. The manual said 10 steps to operate this machine. When you are in a hot environment, like any uncomfortable environment, too cold, too hot, too noisy, too smelly, there's a tendency for you to say, hey, I think step 6 is redundant. This room is so hot, so I want to get up, and therefore your hands can be chopped. Accidents can occur. But do we attribute that to heat-induced discomfort? Probably not. We just did negligence, and therefore we do not attribute that due to heat. Likewise, when somebody collapsed during the peak summer and passed on due to cardiovascular failure, probably the post-mortem cardiovascular failure. Nothing to do with heat. This might go back all the way to ICD coding, put a bracket, heats provoked, heats induced. Then you appreciate the implications of a warming world, or because we are significantly under-quantifying the impact on heat. So we did a study. I know I have limited time. What it shows is, do we administer a risk-taking test? Participants serving as their own control, counterbalance that. Intervention was ice slurry, ice slushy, some call it. Not particularly hot, but long story short, when they were not given the intervention, the thermal comfort results in higher risk-taking behavior. It was a balloon analog risk-taking test. Healthcare workers taking risks is never good for themselves and also for the patients. So in Project Heat Safe, this is my last part here. This is again an example how we should partner across the ministry. Don't see the funder as a contractual relationship. You want to make true transformation changes, right? They must be in your WhatsApp, must be in your WeChat. That constant conversation, because you care, he cares. It's not so much I fund you, I have to report every 6 months, very transactional. You won't, because you finish a report, you write your paper. So sometimes I think there's a mismatch between the KPI and the universities, especially for the younger faculty, right? Saying, what translation? I want to get the grant, write papers, get my promotions, get my tenure, and that's about it. So the university leadership must relook, how do we truly harness these academics who are producing the science, and make sure you tackle the right motivations. So here, work across, and I will not going to tell, it's a you have sociologists, physiologists, physicians, epidemiologists, historians, and a mechanical engineer. We need everyone to come into the conversation. I didn't show numbers because sometimes I find from a communication perspective, if I show 1,000 died versus 2,000 died, does it change your behavior? This might still not change your behavior. I like to put faces, to what we are talking about. Now, people who are pregnant know that epidemiological data showing that their offspring will be compromised, but they are still there working simply because of livelihood. South Korea, cool temperature, highest physiological strain. There's complete disassociation with ambient condition and internal physiological strain, because this was the only vocation they work as hard as they can. So it's more complex. Don't assume the climate input is enough for exertional heat stroke. I'll not go into detail, but don't look at the mean. If you look at mean, you will conclude they were okay. We pick out the individuals and say that there were individuals who are crossing that threshold. So this is where putting the physiological lens, go down conducting ethnography, sociology input are critically important to pick out outliers. Because from the mean graph, you will conclude everyone was okay, but can you accommodate one death, 39.5, by working underground indoor is no joke. And they are doing this not just once a week, many days, many weeks, many years. No wonder health can be compromised. So this one quick intervention, very scalable. Long story short, again, we found with more rest, better productivity. Okay, it's not what you think. How can I give more rest? I'm here as a bottom line to meet. If you don't give them rest, they can rest in their own manner, and some might push, and then the health implications will be manifested in other ways. Work with the ministry, produce the results, change the policy, don't stop there. Audit, we found 1/3 not responding. Do you want to punish them immediately? No. Understand why not. There's a reason why people are not responding to policy. Did you not co-create with them? Did you not see from their perspective? See it from an empathy. Right now, we are saying that those projects who have biggest resources, you should have an in-situ climatic logger. We don't believe the nearest weather station projection will be representative of your in-situ, and therefore, there's one reason that the work sites are not responding. Is that what we're explaining here is not correlated with what you're reporting at the nearest station, so we can augment that part. Various requirements coming from different ministries, and I will share afterwards your time how we organize ourselves in Singapore in the heat resilience working group and how various ministries contributes to that. I'm a physiologist. My final slide here in terms of the hard content is 5 ways to reduce your core temperature, attenuate and extend. By doing so, your capacity will be expanded. This has positive implication of ability to do well in a hot environment. So there are solutions there, and this is a comprehensive, sustainable package for all of us to adopt and make yourself not just survive, but thrive in the warming world. And learn from history too. Soldiers, athletes, even therapeutic side these days, the goodness of onsen and sauna are being discovered. Heat can provide good health. You don't want to walk outside. Use it to your advantage. Use this and apply it beyond this old context. Or you heard about the Heat Resilience and Performance Center, and this is the Southeast Asia sponsored by WHO, WMO Heat Health Hub. That we want to do more capacity. The 3 areas we are focusing on: urban heat, a lot to learn from Hong Kong, occupational heat, and then the culture and traditional practices. That is exciting. Layer that. It's important. Finally, I know there's a lot of experts in this room on air pollutions. We want to combine air pollutions and heat. 1 + 1 is 2, 1.5, 3, I don't know, but we cannot cut them out because they can occur in tandem. Also, the government has invested in a $5 million US capability. Not the same lab that you saw. We're going to build another one. This time we're going to fuse in the pollutants using immersive environment. We want to bring the field into the lab onto the field to really close out the mechanistic understanding and with the ecological validity. June, you might be aware of, when I'm part of June, this is an initiative, very good information, so do check them out. And then finally, I put a big advertisement, consider the big forum in Singapore next year. You are highly welcome. Okay, with that, I rushed through my presentation. I'm sorry, I overran the time, and I hope we have more engagement during the panel discussion and then in this afternoon. With that, thank you for your attention.
It's very clear Jason has really thought about this, right? So it's good to have a specialized center that is taking the job of studying heat that can be shared with the world. Now, we're going to have the panel discussions now, or is it still some presentations, right? Oh, okay. So, okay, may I invite Clarence Wong to give his presentation. He'll be followed by Yeung, and then Wong Sek Hong, and then Professor Tam, before we sit down and have a quick panel discussion. Over to you.
Thank you, and I think Jason has given us a very good kind of talk about heat. I think my perspective in terms of talking about heat is more from the insurance and reinsurance perspective. In our industry, in insurance, we always talk about temperature. Temperature is something that we deal with on a daily basis. I still remember sometime maybe 20 years ago, we were repeatedly approached by a Japanese company asking us to insure against cold weather. It is an ice cream company. So they were afraid that if weather were cold in Japan, their sales will drop. Eventually, we didn't do this transaction because it is more about the type of risk that we are taking. But it shows that temperature is always one topic that kind of bothers us. But actually, extreme heat is one of the things, what we classified as secondary perils, that are of now the most important topic in the global insurance reinsurance industry. Now, maybe I can explain a little bit what is secondary peril. In our business, we deal with a lot of those primary perils like earthquake and typhoon and so on. But at the same time, there are also some of those other risks like floods, heat, droughts that are also producing a lot of damages. And actually, in the last 10 years, the proportion of this in terms of the total insurance and economic losses has increased. And it is now actually the major contributor to global economic losses from natural catastrophes. If you look at the top 10 losses, economic losses and insurance losses in 2023 and also in 2024, most of those are actually grouped under this kind of secondary peril. Why we are so concerned about this, I think one of the reasons is that both the severity and the frequencies of this is increasing, and they are, in a sense, different from the traditional natural catastrophe that we insured. Traditionally, we rely on diversification. If there is an earthquake in Japan, it will not be correlated with a hurricane in California or in the America, or windstorm in Europe. So each of these events are independent, and we can diversify through this pooling of risk. But secondary peril is different in the sense that they are increasingly look like they are correlated, systemic. You are seeing floods almost everywhere in the world. You are seeing from previous talks that the high temperature is actually happening along the same longitudes across the world. So the question we are asking, or the things that we are bothering us, is whether this kind of risk will become uninsurable in the future. What we are relying nowadays is on kind of increasing the premiums to reflect the higher claims year after year. But eventually, the price will be, or the premium will be too high for everyone to afford. Then this risk will become uninsurable. So we are trying to tackle this in different areas. One is, of course, in terms of better understanding the science behind these secondary perils by collecting more data, improving our models, and also looking at how we can manage systemic risk. Systemic risk is not necessarily uninsurable, but it is very difficult to insure. And finally, regulation could help in this. One form of extreme regulation is that I think I just mentioned in a couple of days, Italy mandated that all natural catastrophe must be insured, or the insurer must accept the insurance of natural catastrophes. So there is no exception, no opt-out. So this is one extreme form of regulation. Here I try to, based on my limited knowledge, to see how insurance or how insurable is heat to different insurance business lines. Heat is affecting almost every insurance business line. For example, property insurance, infrastructure could be damaged by extreme heat. Life and health, of course, we heard that people are vulnerable to extreme heat. Business interruption, if you think about supply chain, it could be disrupted by extreme heat. Agricultural insurance, definitely it will be affected by extreme heat. But nowadays, it is not necessarily the case that all this risk is insurable. I think we are doing much better in terms of the health and safety side. In terms of agricultural insurance, only some of those, like crop agricultural productivity, this is covered. On the other hand, for example, if there is a reduced work time, or the workers are not able to work during high temperature, is this insurable? This is not in most cases because globally there are a lot of differences. So I'm just trying to present a general perspective. So I think one of the challenges for us is to kind of improve the insurability of heat in the insurance industry. Yesterday I was in another conference on InsurTech, and I was being asked a number of times by a lot of those tech companies, because they said that if a project is not insurable, it is not bankable. So there are lots of InsurTech or new technology being introduced to help us to mitigate the impact of heat. For example, more resilient building structure or practices. But those projects will need bank financing, and the bank will need the insurers to kind of cover the risk. So there is a look that we need to look into in terms of how we can support the insurability of extreme heat, and also the coming up of new solutions that will help us to deal with this extreme heat. Heat is always covered in most of the insurance policies, particularly in life and health. If there is some illnesses because of heat, it will be covered by medical or CI or other insurance products. But what we have been seeing recently is the coming of some dedicated insurance policies that helps to deal with the impact of heat. In Japan, I think it is a very hot topic now because there has been a lot of almost all the major insurers have launched heat stroke insurance. Some of those are very simple, 100 yen a day, and you can buy any date you want. You can buy it just for today or tomorrow. This one is the first one in Hong Kong, AXA. It's a heat wave parametric insurance. The concept is very simple. It is 19.9 Hong Kong dollar in premium. And it is parametric, meaning that it doesn't depend on whether you suffer from the losses or suffer from heat or loss. It is based on the temperature level. So if the temperature exceeds 36 degrees on 3 consecutive days, you get the compensation, which is $100. So I think this is some examples to show that how our industry insurance is coming up with new solutions. Parametric insurance that based on some external parameters is very useful. And also microinsurance is also being used here to protect the livelihood of people suffering from heat. So yeah, I see my time is coming up, so I will just stop here. Thank you.
Clarence, go. Thank you, Clarence. Eva?
So I will just stand here for a better view. So thank you so much for having me as a representative from the international organization that is working for the Hong Kong society. this slide is not I'm not going to just to show you my face, but also how we work as a connection or as a bridge to with the community and the global network or the other networks in our society. So right. So how we work in Hong Kong for people are facing different kinds of disaster risks. We have a pillar. So you can see that the pillar, we identify three components. That we find that in Hong Kong, in this context, we need to work more on these three pillars. So first of all is to ensure people have the knowledge and also information. So that means that the different groups of population, different characteristics of the people, they can get access to the right information at the right time. So the second point is that it's very important to ensure the sustainability of our work is to put people together, and so that they are willing to support mutually, they are willing to render caring or any kind of support. Like for example, during COVID time, we did the research after the COVID time and realized that people are different. They feel that they find it so difficult to get access to the basic needs from the government or from other sectors, but they prefer to have access or support from their neighborhood, and it works sometimes in some of this society. So we find that it's so important to ensure that we know each other in our community, we know each other in our neighborhood. And thirdly is to connect with different stakeholders in our society. So we render support by the support of different leaderships in different industries. So from the first pillar, how to ensure the information and knowledge of our community, it also aligned with not only of the Red Cross movement strategy, but also at the same time with the Sendai framework, of course. And so that under this strategy, under this framework, we realized that we need to work more on ensuring early warning information. I know these 4 boxes were being shown in CM's slide, I remember. And so for the green box is actually being told that should be worked more by the Red Cross Society. And so when we are working more with the community and to ensure that their capacity are being strengthened or enhanced, at the same time we realize that we need more information. We need more information to ensure that we can deliver the right, or I would say that we need more information in different stages when we are working on disaster preparedness. And so when we are ensuring that this early warning, early action can be done in the society, we are working on all hazard approach. I know today we are talking more on heat, but when we go into the community, we do assessment, and it is on different hazards at the same time. And so we also need to identify different time scale when they are facing different hazards. So yeah, and this is where we work specifically on disaster risk reduction and also preparedness. And now when we are facing more disasters, more extreme events, including heat, we need more information to ensure the early action can be in place. So so here are some snapshots that how we work before, during, and all year round towards heat specifically. So according to like what I mentioned on the first pillar about ensuring information delivered, we deliver through social media, of course, and also a lot of like going into school to do education, and we have some more in-depth seminar. For example, heat and the relation on heat and outdoor workers, and also heat and psychological support and psychological stress. And so we target to some specific groups to have more, to ensure them to have more information. And very importantly, we also organize in-house training. so that to ensure that all the staff from different departments, they realize the impact of heat and to the society or to the people, so that they can think about more solutions in their services. And right on the so just now, like in October, we organized and right on the International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction, and we organized the Fighting the Heat in our community and roused more attention. And so we also have the mobile application, and that included these kind of information. What is next is that we hoped, with the very generous support from the UST team, and we hope to integrate more information of different disasters like air quality, heat, and rainfall, etc., into a one-stop website, web platform. We hope to launch it in next year, early next year. So other than information, we also how we bring people together. We go into the community, say for example, to the people living in subdivided units. We listen to them. So that is how we work sustainably. So we listen to people, we listen to the ladies, we listen to the children, how they face the different disasters, different hazards, and how they deal with it. And then we come up with some solutions. Say for example, we install more small fans or the humidifier, etc. And very importantly, we also bring them out from their home so that they can experience more nature. And at the same time, it's very educational. We will tell them how nature is connecting with your daily life, how your daily behavior is actually connecting with the disaster risk. And those that I've just mentioned are all year-long actions. And during the heat time, the hot days, we have health checks in the community. We also distribute items to the outdoor workers, and also we connect with the community, the shops in the communities, and we put the cooling items over there, and so encourage the gaifang, the people, to just take it. So we don't work silo. We are not working silo. So we need to work, just to name a few, we work together with all of these stakeholders. So which is also echoing to the pillar I just mentioned, pillar 3. We need partnership. So everyone, you have your professional, and we need your effort, and so we join all of you, all of us, and then we work together. And we are not really doing good in this thing, I would say. So I have also thinking about what's next. We need to do better. And so these are the points that I think next year we can do better, or in the coming year we can do better. Is that it's very important. We need to review our past experience, how we do that, how the community is taking it, and also we need to really target different people to one message or one size doesn't fit all. So we need to target different people on their characteristics and tailor-make more things with them. So that's all for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we have Wong second?
It is not. It's hot stuff.
So thank you so much having me there. I'd like to, I learned a lot from the speaker in the former sessions. And in fact, in the recent year, everyone feels that the weather is becoming hotter and hotter. And the prolonged hot weather adversely impacts the well-being of the outdoor worker. Especially, we're concerned about the outdoor cleanliness. So Oxfam, I concern much about how to build resilience and capacity of those deprived groups, the outdoor workers, to cope with the climate change. And also, we think that it is really urgent and crucial. So we start from research to further understand the street cleaners, the working situation of them in Hong Kong. in 2021 and 22, we try to interview those street cleaners face to face, and we find that about half of them felt unwell and have some kind of heat-related illness during the work time. And in the second research, we go into the reviewed collection points to understand the working situation. And some cleaners report that those renovated RCP was even much hotter and more suffocated than the older ones. So we suggest the government to do two things at the time. First, to include the guidance laws of prevention of heat stroke at work, this guidance in the tendering document, so that to ensure all the outsourced companies will follow the guidance and put enough prevention for the outdoor cleaners. And secondly, we suggest the government to have the heat index. So we are very happy to see that the HKO launched the new special weather tips, and also the Labor Department followed HKO's heat index to formulate the heat stroke guidance. We think that this is a good move. So after that, in 2023, we came back to interview the cleaner, whether it is really improved. After that, they report that they really can have their own rest time. They can take the rest even they feel that they're unwell. But we still have noticed two pain points of the issues. The first is there is some regional difference. The location to measure the heat index cannot really effectively reflect the actual heat conditions of the working situation of the workers. And secondly, we find that because most of the outdoor cleaners are elderly, so they are not used to use their smartphones during the work time. So although the warning alert can be accessed through the smartphone, but because they seldom use it, so they could not easily get the notification. That is the problem. So we also go, according to the International Labour Organization, we find that there's still a policy gap in the development of the personal level equipment to build the workers' resilience. So with all this, we try to find out some solution with tech. So we collaborate with a health tech vendor from Cyberport. We work together to establish a wearable heat stroke detection system in local base. How to do it? We set up the device of WBGT in 3 locations in Hong Kong, including the Loft District, the Chuen Wan, and the Kwun Tong. Then we apply the formula of the HKO to measure the heat index locally. And finally, we also deliver the smartwatch to the cleaner so that they can receive the HKO heat index and also our local heat index. The results see that there is some discrepancy between the heat index from HKO and also our local index. For example, in the Loft District, you can see that there were 16 days trigger more hours of heat stress warning compared to HKO's records. And you can see the blue spot. It is from the HKO. It is all amber. But to our calculation, it's rich red or even black. The similar situation also in Chunman and also in Guntong. So we found that our little project showed that there is really some kind of discrepancy between the government citywide, the heat index, and the local situation. So it is time for us to see whether it is a time to review whether we can do better and improvement in this system. And also we suggest the government to have a local index as a supplementary reference to the citywide index, so that the worker can have a accurate assessment of the situation and have a rest. This is also a very important kind of preventive measure. And also we see that the watch, some kind is much faster and friendly for the elderly to receive the message. Also, we suggest the government to do so. So that's we have a very good talk to the Labor Department, and they welcome a suggestion, and we look forward to further collaborate with different parties to push forward the project. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So our last speaker, Professor Tam.
Okay, hello, my name is Kevin. I am a psychologist. I'm very glad that Alexis invited me to come here to kind of share some psychological perspectives on how people respond to heat. Because psychology's job is to understand how humans think and behave. I'm not sure about you, but some people may hold this assumption that people don't take action because they are ignorant, because they don't know enough, right? But of course, most of you should understand, right? Knowing doesn't necessarily mean taking actions, right? So we know that, of course, we have learned a lot of lessons from the history of humans that giving out information doesn't necessarily induce behavior change, right? That happens for like smoking, right? So we have a lot of people smoke. So we need to think about how humans think and behave. In response to heat-related risk or climate risk in general, in fact, psychologists and social scientists have done a lot of work already. Here, I'm trying to kind of break all these related processes and narrow down in this kind of figure. So what scientists are doing is to, of course, estimate the risk and do the forecast. And they have the information and they communicate it to the public. But this is just half of the story, because in the end, you need people to understand, right, the risk, right? They perceive the risk, and then they take action in response to the risk. So I highlighted this risk perception and risk response because these fall into the social scientific enterprise, right? While the risk estimation and risk communication is more about what scientists do. So on risk perception and risk response, psychologists, social scientists have done a lot of work. Here's one model. Well, I'm not going into details because you're not psychologists, probably you're not very interested in this. But what is interesting here is just the model highlights one thing. That is, I think Alex has used the word last mile problem, right? So this last mile must be a very long and winding road, right? Because a lot of things happen within the person's mind when they understand risk and then make a decision as to how they respond to it. And at the same time, a lot of things also happen between individuals, not only within an individual's mind, but also between individuals in the communities, right? So on this note, I have 4 points I want to make today, right? I think these 4 points resonate quite well with some of the previous speakers' sharing. The first point is that not everyone perceives heat-related risk in the same way, right? That's quite kind of intuitive. Some people consider heat, even though we know that we have record high temperature, but some people perceive just something coming. Some people see it as, well, a little bit uncomfortable, but it is kind of manageable. Right? And of course, some people understand. I think a lot of us understand. It could be catastrophic. The different people may have different perceptions of risk. So we need to understand, so when we communicate to the audience, so who are they? What kind of perception they have? If they don't see it as kind of a catastrophic or something that we need response, so why is it the case? So that's something we need to consider. We also need to consider that humans don't always process information in an objective and systematic manner, right? If you show them numbers, right, they'll turn their head away. Right? They don't like to process numbers. Most people don't, right? Hard facts sometimes don't change behavior because people don't have the motivation or time or the capacity to process or understand those information. And also because people commit biases, right? Many things we understand, as we understand the world, we have a lot of biases. For example, people tend to be optimistic. People tend to think that other people are more vulnerable than they are. And this bias actually could be kind of something adaptive. It's good to feel good about ourselves, right? That's how we survive in this very difficult world. We have evidence even old adults who are supposed to be vulnerable. We're finding showing that old adults think that people older than they are more vulnerable than they are. Okay? So people may have these optimistic biases. And interestingly, also some findings suggest that some people have these biases, they are optimistic because they have a lot of experience of living in hot places. Like people in Singapore, right? People in Hong Kong, right? Hot temperature is part of our life, right? So I'm used to it. Our body is well adapted to it. Nothing we need to do. Right? So people may hold this with perception. Findings suggesting that people have more experience living in low latitude countries, they tend to perceive less risks related to heat. So the experience can also contribute to biases. We also have to understand that we recommend some responses, right, to the public. If it is, there's a risk here, you need to take some action, like use air conditioning to cool yourself down, or you have to have breaks during work, whatever. But it's important to point out that life as usual is also a response option. Some people prefer to just take risk, right, because they have these calculations of different options in front of them. Perhaps it's just too costly, right, to take the recommended action. Using air conditioning, obviously, is costly, particularly if you're from low-income families. So not taking action, living life as usual, is not necessarily something irrational. It could be actually a reasoned response. People tolerate and accept the risk. And sometimes people make improvised responses, which are not necessarily following what the recommended course of action. I remember when I was in my secondary schools, we didn't have air conditioning back then, of course, right? It was very hot. We have only one electric fan on top. And our improvised response is that we put on 4-hour shirts. We'll have our underwear only. Right? Somehow the teachers allow that, and we have of course, it's a male school. Right? So that's kind of improvised response that people may have. Right? It could be adaptive, it could be not. And we have to understand how people make these decisions. The last point here. Risk perception, risk response are socially constructed. Right? I think Jason's named a few examples about how Singaporean people see risk, right, and how they respond. Right? Cashews mindset, right? It's one thing I learned from my colleagues in Singapore as well. Right? Maybe Hong Kong people also share that kind of mindset. Right? And we see things through the lens of our cultures, our traditions, our groups. If you're working in an organization that puts a lot of emphasis on work safety, the chances are, as a worker, you take it seriously. But your company doesn't take care of it, right? Nobody talks about it. And chances are, you're not following what you recommend, right? So these risk perception, risk response, the socially constructed thing is very important. Particularly when it comes to older adults, we have a lot of findings showing that older adults tend to care more about their grandchildren and children more than themselves. Right? So they have this social motivation to do things rather than taking care of themselves. That's the personal motivation. So there's some programs, as far as I know, in other countries that are ongoing, to take advantage of these elderly's motivation, caring for the children. They have these programs like intergenerational messaging. Instead of having governments telling older adults to take care of your body, engage grandchildren, the children, to send messages to the elderly, right, to motivate them to take the recommended actions. So this is taking advantage of the fact that people's responses sometimes are socially constructed rather than personally constructed. Right? So these are the 4 minor points I want to share with you, and I hope we can continue this discussion during panel or later in the day. Thank you.
We have 25 to 30 minutes for this session, and I'm assuming there are probably lots of questions or comments in the room. I'm going to allow the panelists from the first session to also ask questions or make comments, because I think one of the things we're very keen on is we've seen many different perspectives. We've seen a Singapore story that Jason has very orderly, he's put it in a very orderly manner. And I think in Hong Kong, we have a lot of capacity as well, but we're less orderly in how we've gone about it. But I think the preparation has begun. We're seeing government departments being interested. We're seeing NGOs, we're seeing scholars wanting to come together. So may I have a show of hands of questions or comments? Alexis.
Well, you might think Jason here, you certainly want to get more from him. And now you have heard some of the actions that Hong Kong community, different sector. I want your first take on what you think you would recommend us do more or directions on that point.
Yeah. Thanks, Shun. I think it's less of me recommending, but rather I'm truly inspired by the approach that if the government is not ready, let's not wait, because we need to survive and thrive right now. That is something, actually that's one of the key impetus that motivated. How do the communities adapt in this warming world, which is very lousy in Singapore, by the way. The huge trust we have with our government, right, means that every problem we think is the government's problem, not ours. So I'm appalled, and I am ashamed to tell you, in the most recent thing that we didn't manage to hack is we are asking people to return their tray after you finish the food in hawker centers. To be fair, the government tried in many ways engaging behavioral scientists, psychologists, it didn't work. That Friday came and said that if you don't return the tray, we're going to fine you, and next Monday everyone return the tray. So that's very disappointing. So please don't perceive that we have hacked it. I think the strength sometimes can be weakness, and therefore I'm looking at this combinational approach and a strong governance that's usually associated with Singapore. With these bottom-up approaches, community effort, with Red Cross, like-minded agency. I think truly then we will close out these gaps in the most efficient way. So not so much, I'm actually here to see what is the motivation of people taking actions bottom-up. Thank you.
Thank you. CM and then Richard.
Yes, thank you. I'm really interested in the presentation by Oxfam about the use of the heat index. And so my question is what recommendations you will make if you will make to the observatory or to the Labor Department. Also for Jason, because as you have heard, we have a different practice compared to Singapore. When we were in Singapore, we learned that Singapore used WBGT, and you also have something I think very intelligent to require certain construction sites to use their own measurements to guide their measures. So maybe Jason can also share a bit more about your practice. Thank you.
Thank you, CM. In fact, we have been talked to the Labor Department before about our project. Initially, they did appreciate our effort, and they recognized there's really a regional difference between the citywide one. they do welcome us to extend the project to other districts and treat it as a supplementary reference to the citywide one. In fact, I do understand it may be some kind of administrative complexity in having to invest putting together. But we do suggest the government may treat it as a best practice because the citywide one is a general one, but it really have some major difference in different working locations. I don't mean really the district, but essentially the some kind of location. So we also encourage the industry because we do understand they have some guidance specific to different industry. So we suggest maybe we can have this kind of introduce this kind of local heat stress detection system to industry to consider to help those outdoor workers and set a best practice for them at all. Yeah.
Jason.
We push out the National Heat Stress Advisory July last year, and each ministry has responded to say what does that mean to us. So if I quote the example from Ministry of Manpower, anyway, I love how our ministry and your ministry is abbreviated MOM, Ministry of Manpower. I know it's called MUM. Also again reminds us and say that it's out of empathy. Sometimes they complain the Ministry of Manpower is always nagging and say, like, why is our moms nagging us because they care about us? Anyway, I know we wrote it out, and what I like it is there is a certain level of customization in the policy. And something was inspiring. Push up policy, but also study who can respond to the policy. And I found that there are big companies, there are small companies, and the policy say that any project that is 5 million and above is mandatory. In situ on-site climatic logger is compulsory, so they are going around auditing. But project that is less than 5 million, you can base on the super duper modeling provided by the government. Okay, sounds right, but if I'm critical enough, I said, no, that's actually not right too. Because usually the problems come from the smaller companies. So how about if you're big companies, you pay for all your loggers on site. The small company, I can get it for free or subsidize you. Okay, so we are not there yet. So we are pushing it. Just renew. I think the government is looking at it and must be partly responsible why they found in the recent audits 1/3 of the worksite are not responding to the policy. At first we have discussions, say, is it time to take out the stick and punish them? I say, no, there must be reasons. So always, embedded that empathy, say, see it from their perspective, maybe it's not optimized it. So also asking from one lesson learned, don't just push out broad policy, customize accordingly. Because in Project Heat Safe, we did provide the data to show there's a huge discrepancy between what the government is providing and the in-situ kind of readings. Thank you.
Jason, can I just ask you a question? You've used the word empathy many times. Is it both a strategy as well as a kind of action plan? Because you said that you set a goal and the goal is no death. So therefore, how do you make that happen? You're kind of saying, well, actually, I need to empathize. I need to go out, right? I need to go out and talk to all these people that we actually don't know how they function in their work. So I kind of read this as both a philosophy and a strategy and kind of an action plan.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, thanks. These days the audience say, "Come on, you are a scientist. You are not a pastor. Those don't sound like an evangelist." But maybe that's just me. I think maybe from my perspective, I sometimes find there's a lot of conversations in the room. We might not truly understand what is happening on the ground. So constantly, I want to hear agencies like Red Cross, what are the pain points on the ground? Because we heard from all the experts here, don't just look at it from one angle. Pushing out information does not mean it will change at the end of it. So we might say, oh, there's more information. We say, yes, that is first step of maybe step 2. So we need to close the loop, last mile, to really touch our heart and say, with all these efforts, things are being changed. But yeah, I think again, if I call out the COVID has reminded us, about Singapore, we are very good in taxing our tycoons, so that we also want to give a shout out to the workers who give us the shelter. during COVID, these are the workers who keep us alive, healthcare workers, to care of our health, our platform workers delivering food at your doorstep, so the least we could do. And therefore, if I have $1, I'm still very biased pushing out, to this population. Guys, we have enough resources to tackle. It's all about allocating the right resources. I always use, if I may, right, air condition is one of the best inventions. So don't now go about saying that air condition is bad and it's a vulgarity. It is not. Aircon is good, but problem is the allocation of air condition is wrong. Just like food, we have enough food to feed the world. One half is overeating, one half has no food. I had a walk at the oncology ward in National University Hospital. I saw that it's a Ministry of Health guidelines policy that say unless it's above 32 degrees Celsius, no aircon will be provided to the patients and the healthcare workers. I saw that, I questioned, where is the evidence? What is the evidence? Clearly there's no evidence. That evening when I went back home, I saw my 16-year-old daughter in a room putting her hoodie, blasting down the aircon and said, "Pa, this means comfort." I said, "You are the one that should be punished. I just saw patients without aircon, and now you are abusing aircon with a hoodie on. Switch it off, and remove your hoodie. You can still feel comfortable." You see, so this is our society. So how we really need psychologists, behavior experts to say how can we hack it. But such is the world that we are living in.
Richard.
Thanks, Christine. A question and a comment, if I may. The question first is, I appreciate Kevin and Jason's talk. Jason, earlier you mentioned the problem with getting people to change behavior, and Kevin, I think, has given some good examples of why that is the case. But in public health, we know the best way to change behavior is legislation. Smoking, seatbelts, crash helmets, fat tax in certain parts, sugar tax in Mexico, all of these legislations bring about change. People scream blue murder about having their freedoms taken away, and 6 months later they've forgotten because we adapt. All right? And we've heard several speakers today talk about how we adapt to heat and various other things. So that's one thing. Legislation should not be overlooked. It's really very, very important. The second thing is my comment, and the comment is I'd like to put in a plea for the other species that live on this planet apart from people who don't have access to air conditioning, who don't understand a heat index warning, and who also are suffering from the effects of climate change. And remind people, in July last year, birds were literally falling dead out of the trees in India because the temperatures were so extreme. In Africa this year, 252 elephants died as a result of drinking water that was contaminated by cyanobacteria, which bred because the temperatures were much higher and the rainfall changes were different. There's been massive amounts of drought in South and Southeast Africa. Tens of thousands of wild animals are dying. In Hong Kong, we have almost no reptiles left. We have a few snakes. Partly that's because we've been spraying against dengue fever to kill mosquitoes. Frogs and toads don't have anything to eat. Snakes don't have anything to eat. Rats and mice explode. We have to put poison down, which kills off the, and so on and so forth. You get the picture, right? These attempts to fix things are causing additional problems. We can't just think of ourselves. We have to think about the wider ecosystem. And that's what the idea of One Health is for, of course. So a plea for the other species as well. We must stop the temperature rises, not just adapt to them.
Great, thank you. Yes. There are two questions, one in front and later at the back.
I really want to thank the participants for the discussion today. I would like to use Professor Lee's idea of like, do we really need to punish people if they use more electricity, or do we have to punish people, let's say if they chew gum in Singapore? So I want to ask the panelists, especially Eva and Ms. Wong, about like your strategies on co-creating a heat strategy to address the problem of heat stress in subdivided flats in Hong Kong, because as we all know, governments, maybe some, as the previous speaker has said that governments is practical to some extent, and they have a lot of lag time to approve a policy and whatnot. So how do we prevent the slippery slope of we're going to punish people from chewing gum into creating a solution with health professionals? So what are the steps that that both organizations can take? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to just hold the answers because I suspect that this is probably a good round for everybody to make some comments. Can I take the question at the back too?
Thank you so much to the speakers. I enjoyed the various perspectives presented today. This is more of a comment, I think. Something that we can also consider in terms of, addressing heat and looking at solutions, also looking at urban planning. So because we're talking about what we can learn from Singapore, one thing we can also look at is how we can implement wind corridors, how we can have green corridors, and how we can try to implement that in the Hong Kong scale as well in terms of urban planning, because that goes a long way into looking at how we can find passive cooling solutions that are not just dependent on ACs, but looking at how we can also just build our systems in a way that can reduce heat and not put the onus on the consumer on how much electricity they're consuming. So that's just another important consideration with legislation as well. I concur with the previous opinions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions out there? Okay. Yes? Okay. If not for now, I think everybody can probably contribute to this round of discussion. So maybe I can start with Eva, and then Oxfam, and then maybe from an insurance perspective, and then perhaps Jason will give you the last word, and Professor Tam can go before Jason, if that's okay. Please.
Thank you so much for your question. And it is really a big project, I would say, or a big step that we need to move on after we understand the needs from the I would say most vulnerable populations in our society. I think what we need is a really mutual platform to have a dialogue with different stakeholders in our society. So not only the people living in the subdivided units, even in the subdivided units, as I mentioned, we listen to different groups of people because they have different ways to deal with heat or different hazards. And I think we also need to talk with for example, I talk with the property management, with the logistics company, how they can do better in terms of carbon emissions, and also very very directly for the heat, can your shopping mall open more, provide more seats for citizens to sit over there? Can your security guards not pushing them away because they really need the air conditioning and they don't have the options? So I think what we need is also at the same time we are thinking of more options for them, not only to put in their house indoor, but allow more options on the streets and in our society.
Thank you for the questions. I think the first thing, for example, regarding the SDU family, because the government is now planning to have the legally accepted SDU Gammon. So it's involved a list of a condition whether it is legally approved. So I think that we just think that we should advocate the government to include this kind of how to reduce the heat stress in this SDU. For example, the ventilation condition, for example, the space, or other necessary instruments. So it may be a way to go, and we can suggest the government to do in this way. And secondly, what Oxfam is doing is also leverage tech in social innovations to improve the situation, the internal situation of the SDU family. So, for example, I will now carry out another project to install some kind of heat reduction window films for those SDU family. so as to decrease the indoor temperature. I suggest we can collaborate together with different fields with more social innovation, because nowadays we need more CP value, high CP values product, and recommend to government to follow suit. Thank you.
Clarence?
I just want to make 2 comments on this. One is whether heat is insurable, because if something is certain to happen, we cannot insure. So if the scientists are telling us that, next year the average temperature will definitely be higher than 2024, then it will be very challenging for us to provide any insurance on that, because we will definitely lose money. So that is the one point. I think in terms of working together with the scientists and academics to understand better the heat, and also make it insurable. The second is rather than looking at the insurability of heat, I think our focus is now on supporting the risk adaptation measures, because there are a lot of ways we can adopt and mitigate the impact of heat. In our industry, it's very common to kind of provide some premium discount if there are good risk management, like fire mitigation, fire alarm system. But we still don't have resilience credit. I think globally there is only one insurance company that is providing resilience credit. That means that if your building, for example, has some resilience measures that lower the temperatures indoor without using energy, that it will provide some credit, and this can be translated into some premium discount. I think that is one area that our industry insurance can kind of promote in terms of helping to incentivize more adaptation and mitigation measures. The same like motor insurance, where we have this NCP system.
Professor Tam?
Yeah. General comment about my experience today here. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to hear comments, suggestions from different perspectives. I think this is exactly all we need. And obviously climate change is in everyone's agenda, regardless of which industry or which fields you're working in. It's something that you have to deal with now. Is it something immediate, something urgent? So as I think as a psychologist, as a primary research, when I'm primary teaching, climate change is always on the top of my list now. I think we need this kind of priority, and but of course there has to be kind of mutual, right? It has to be something shared by others. So I think obviously government should take a leading role to make it a problem more visible, and then everyone's concerted effort is so important. And I agree that we need legislation, or legislative measures, right? We need policy changes. We also need legislations. We need architectural solutions. We need behavioral solutions. So the plan that we need, the response plan we need, it has to be a very holistic, very multifaceted one. Yeah. So that's my feeling.
Indeed. Yes. Jason, you have the last word.
Yeah. First, I want to make a qualifier that you can chew gums in Singapore. That's always being teased by my friends from overseas that you can't even chew gum, poor things. So let me buy you some chewing gums. You can chew gums, but we don't encourage you to sell chewing gum. So you can carry a carton of chewing gum and convince it it's for your own consumption. No problem. You won't be fined in Singapore. I previously mentioned, I will make a quick explanation. Heat, use it correctly, can be a eustress. Heat controls how you exercise, can affect how you exercise, how you sleep with the warming nights, and also how you eat. We often ask people slightly on the kind of obese, a bit of extra weight, go for a swim. They come back to us and say, I swim every morning, but not very successful. We are lousy physiologists. We found out they eat very well after the swim. So we're exploring maybe the swimming lane. Let's again not call it an obesity lane. That's so bad. Call it a weight management lane. That heat up the lane a couple of degrees after the swim. You don't get so cold, and therefore appetite can be suppressed. Likewise, in the wards, the elderly are not eating well. And now with these hot wards, it's going to make things worse. How about cooling vests, something cool, reduce core temperature, and therefore increase appetite. So you see heat as a stressor. I think we have been positioning heat 99% as a distress. For the occupational workers, for certain sectors, yes. But for the majority of us here, I ask that you embrace the heat. I love the theme of this conference. Don't escape from the heat. Use the heat to your advantage. Go out. You have beautiful mountains, waters. Go out for more walks. Even in summer days, you don't have to be there and walk the same intensity and duration. You want to have the strain. As I say, you can make use of the heat and make your workout more efficient. So that's all I want to say. Completely agree with the One Health approach. Completely agree that if it's good, it could be painful near term, but if you do good, have the gumption as leader to make tough decisions. That the current, even climate change will be a long-term issue, right? You might displease acutely, but if you do good long-term, do it. Climate change will only exacerbate inequality. To me, I think it's summing out, right? It's an inequality issue. More stressor, little resources, you're in big trouble. Don't see climate change as one, but we have other ongoing issues. We are getting more and more sedentary. So not just the stressors will increase, your personal capacity will decrease, and therefore the same absolute stressor will be expressed relatively harder for you. So one way is we're going to do that mitigation conversation. To me, is a political conversation. We have to adapt, but what you can do is increase your capacity. Exercise physiology is right. So when you have more work, don't say you have no time for exercise. Say you have more work, no problem. I'm going to increase my capacity. Keep it coming. Bigger capacity, those more work will be expressed relatively easier. Also, more work means more exercise. Don't say more work means no exercise. Thank you.
Great. Well, just to round off the morning, obviously, thank you all for coming, and thank you, Jason, for coming all the way from Singapore, and all our panelists who've joined us. Just maybe one small piece of information from HKUST. Our team are scientists. We want to do the kind of science that is helpful because to provide the evidence, but we also realize that just doing that is not going to be enough, because we want the science to actually be used on the ground in some useful way. And those useful ways may not come from us, so we need to partner with others. And in the last year or so, we've partnered with Red Cross, because we want to see whether the sort of things that we do can be implemented on the ground by other organizations. And I'm inspired by ideas like, we can develop technology. If people don't use the mobile phone, there are other ways to help them to get the information today. And there are lots of technologists and geeks at universities and other startups who are excited about that kind of new tech. I think there are people who want to fund those techs. So, there are lots of things sort of exciting that can come. I'm inspired by the comment about biodiversity. Actually, you've answered a question that I couldn't answer last night, because just a bit of information, as from some of the speakers, the UN has now taken up this issue at a very high level, because early warning is very important. How you warn people to take measures, that's going to save lives as well as maybe protect infrastructure. So at the UN level, also at the national level, that means our national government, they are actually pushing very hard to spread the news on early warning. That requires science, which we're going to participate in, but also, I think, what to do. So it is going to be a whole of society approach. But the issue about biodiversity is at the UNEP level. They want early warning to combine weather, pollution, which we can deal with, but also biodiversity. And in our thinking, we had a meeting last night, and we couldn't quite understand how to stick in the bit about biodiversity. So I think you've given us some answers in terms of Hong Kong and GBA, how we might provide the kind of data and understanding of what happens to our other species. So that's extremely helpful. So perhaps you'll come back again, because we want to continue to have the kind of conversation within our own society, as well as learn from Singapore and others at the international level. And to remind the advertising, next year we're going to focus on precipitation, which is heavy rainfall, which is a big problem also for Hong Kong. So heat and heavy rainfall are two of the issues that we're going to take up in Hong Kong. So thank you again for spending so much time with us.